if you could take a moment and go to thegrowingbanddirector.com to give at least $5 or $3 a month, and it helps the content continue to be created for you to help our profession grow. Let's go back to our scheduled episode. Welcome back to the Growing Band Director Podcast. This is episode number 238. I'm here with Alex Kaminsky from Vandercook College of Music in Chicago. Alex, how are you?
Great. How are you doing, Kyle?
Good, Alex. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it very much. You say that you work a lot of bands. You have a lot of opportunities to rehearse bands. What are some like common things that you know you're going to kind of get into when you're dealing with almost any band that you walk into?
Well, generally, when I walk in, I ask the band director to go ahead and warm the band up the way they typically would warm up. And then I chime in. My goal is to basically strengthen whatever it is that they're doing. And we spend a pretty good amount of time on fundamentals and just making sure that everybody's breathing the same way, producing a tone in the same manner. And then we try to, lock some center of pitch so that we can ultimately achieve a band sonority that we can then transfer into the music. And so I spend a good bit of time on fundamental work. And then it makes it easier when we actually get into the music so that we can work on the music as opposed to tuning chords and things like that because we've sort of done our homework in advance.
Do you find that a lot of bands around the country maybe don't spend as much time on fundamentals?
Maybe not as much as we would like. Myself, having been a high school band director for 30 years, I'm very sensitive to the fact that time is always fleeing due to AP testing and field trips, and the seniors have to go to the auditorium for a meeting, and et cetera. Snow days recently, actually, we were online yesterday because of the sub-zero temperatures and all that good stuff. And so, because of that, we as school band directors tend to want to move into the music as quickly as possible so that we're ready for assessment or whatever concert. But what I found out throughout my career is that the more time I spent on fundamentals, the faster I was able to rehearse through the music. And so there's a balance to be struck there for sure. But yeah, we can always spend a little more time on fundamentals, in my view.
Yeah, it's hard to find that balance, right? Because kids obviously didn't join band to do fundamentals, but we know we need to do them to sound good. An instant thing that band directors might be able to do if they say, okay, I really want to do that, but I'm bad at doing that. Maybe program a little bit easier on your next concert so you have the freedom to work on the fundamentals and know that your performance is still going to be good. And then I think you're right, as you get into it more and more with fundamentals, then you'll be able to go back to the normal level repertoire you're used to.
Right. Well, and you touched on something because you're right. Kids don't join band to work on fundamentals. However, there's an approach that I use that I try to make it so compelling and interesting that they almost don't realize that they're working on fundamentals. Especially when we get to like chord progressions and chorales. You can do fundamentals in a musical way. I mean, if you listen to Yo-Yo Ma play one note on his cello, it entrances you, and it's one note, And so that's kind of the approach I try to take to make everything that we do music, whether it's a note, a chord, a phrase, whatever it is. And I think it makes it more compelling and engaging for the students, even at the college. It's the same thing. It's just a matter of, I think, how you approach it and how you quote unquote sell it.
Yeah, it's not, this is fundamentals time, and then we're going to start making music.
Right. In fact, Cynthia Johnston Turner was rehearsing a band one time, and I love this term. She calls it ensembleship time. So the warm up is what happens when you come in and you sit in your chair and you start playing some notes on your horn. Like, I'm a clarinetist, and so I'm making sure my reeds are working and all the keys are moving, and et cetera. But then once we start collectively, that is no longer the warm up. That's ensembleship time. And that's when we calibrate together as a unit, as an ensemble. So I kind of like that terminology.
Excelsior Music Publishing is proud to sponsor the Growing Band Director podcast. Excelsior Music Publishing provides new music for concert band, jazz ensemble, solo and ensemble, and books for all levels and occasions, including a specially curated and robust selection of music for your contest and festival performances. A variety of overtures, marches, and lyric works included on numerous state lists await. Select music that's perfect for your contest and festival needs at excelsiamusic.com. That's EXCELCIA music.com. Who are some of your mentors, and what did they do well that you look back on?
Well, it's interesting you asked that question because if I had one piece of advice to give young teachers is to find a mentor or mentors. Don't try to go it alone. Get people in your band room. And I was that young band director who, I pretty much had it figured out, and I think I can do this on my own. And I was also embarrassed to have people
Mm-hmm.
in because my band was never ready. But to be honest, our bands are never ready for somebody to come in if we look at it that way. And so I had really three primary mentors in the early part of my career, in the first half of my career, and they were all Florida folks. The first one I would have to name would be Joe Krynas, who is he's basically a clinician that goes into band rooms. He doesn't anymore. Unfortunately, he's sort of seeing the checkered flag right
Mm.
now. He's had a very full life of music making, but he's really an influencer in that. I remember my first year teaching, I got an announcement from the front office that said, Mr. Kaminsky, there's a Joseph Krynas here to see you. And I had no idea he was going to show up. He just sort of showed up, walked in, and was my mentor ever since. And he taught me really two things. One is how to understand what quality literature is. And so, like my background, there's a session that I do this called Survey of Forgotten Band Literature, or School Band Literature, I should say, and a lot of those pieces basically he exposed me to a lot of the Claire Grundman things, Albert Oliver Davis. I mean, just quality school band literature. But the other thing that he taught me was the importance of getting a band to play very musically in terms of a line, and also how to get the band to achieve colors, because he taught me that in the wind area, as far as wind instruments, the woodwinds are where the colors reside. So he would always have the woodwinds play and then have the brass join that sound, because
Mm.
brass can wipe out the woodwind sound and it becomes very brass heavy. And so he taught me that, and also the importance of dynamics, like soft dynamics. I'd be like, yeah, my band's playing pretty soft. He's like, no, that's about a mezzo forte, and really getting them to play soft. Somebody once said that the best way to create effect is through contrast.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in anything, the marching arena, jazz band, whatever. So dynamic contrast really is underrated. I mean, it really can be spectacular. We have the Chicago Symphony Orchestra right here, and you hear them play something very soft, and then they open up. I mean, it's pretty dramatic. So anyway, so Joe Krynas was one. A second one was a legend in Florida. His name is Jack Crew. He passed away several years ago, and I actually took over for him at Lincoln High School in Tallahassee. That was my third school that I taught at. And he always listened to the Marine Band, with his earpods and so forth, and the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. And he always tried to get a band to create an incredible sonority. Like his thing was like the sound, and really more of an orchestral approach, which is kind of how I approach my bands. So just really moving a lot of air. And then the third one would be Bobby Adams, who was a very successful high school band director in Florida at Leon High School, also in Tallahassee. And then he was president of NBA and director of bands at Stetson University. And he also was big. He was good friends with Jack Crew, and he was also big on sonority, but also musical intensity. Like I remember him rehearsing my bands and like stomping on the podium, trying to get my kids to really like sell the music. So those would be three: Joe, Jack, and Bobby, that were some of the biggest influences on me in the early part of my career.
It is a sign of strength to ask for help, to have people come in and look at your band and listen to your band. People think it's the opposite. It shows your kids so much when a clinician comes in. The clinician you bring in has heard worse bands and has heard better bands. It's somewhere in the middle. So that's a sign of strength. Joe has a great arrangement, if people don't know it, of Make Our Garden Grow. It's just
Hmm.
gorgeous from Candide. If people haven't heard that, they should do it. My good friend Trent Austin started Austin Custom Brass so many years ago. You can call them at 816-410-0826. They ship all over the world. They have a shop in Kansas City, Missouri, and they really are an amazing sponsor of this podcast. They do trumpets, trombones, euphoniums, tubas, mouthpieces, and more, all the way from the beginner to the professional. Austin Custom Brass has worked with thousands of brass players from around the world. And you can check them out on www.austincustombrass.biz. Whether you're a student, a band director, a parent, or a player, Austin Custom Brass is your place to go for all your brass playing needs. Austin Custom Brass works with band programs from all over the country. They can provide a bid to you today. They can work within your school's budget and they accept POs. Call their team today at 816-410-0826. Austin Custom Brass is an amazing resource for brass players and great humans, great people. You'll love working with them. Give them a call. One of my missions is repertoire. It's like every day I'm trying to find that the older pieces, the newer pieces, all of it. I think that's just such a key that people settle too quickly. I think they go, oh, this piece is here. I like it. Let's do it. So anytime I hear something like that, my ears perk up.
Well, and I think balance is important, really, in anything. Just like we're talking about fundamentals working versus on music, a healthy balance of anything. So, you've heard the adage, something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. Just balancing in programming from the quality literature that we grew up with to the something that was written today, and I think it's all important.
Can you talk a little bit about your time in Florida as a 30-year band director before coming to Vandercook?
Sure. So I taught again for 30 years, and I taught at five different high schools. Um, and really, I would have just stayed in one place, but opportunities would open themselves. And so my first school was a junior senior high situation in Cocoa Beach, Florida. So I taught 6 through 12, taught middle school band in the first half of the day, and then went to the high school. And I actually had 16 kids in my first high school band. And
Mm.
so built that up. I was there for 6 years, and we had 80 kids when I finished. It was a small school, about 500 kids in the school total. Then my second school was at Auburndale High School, which is sort of halfway between Orlando and Lakeland, Florida. Sort of a blue collar type of community. Kids and parents work really hard. And so I was there for several years. And then Jack Crew was the director of bands at Lincoln High School, and he was retiring, and he asked if I would be interested in taking over for him. And so I moved up to Tallahassee. And then Paula Thornton was the band director of Buchholz High School in Gainesville, Florida, was retiring, and so I was asked to do that. I was the guy that basically took over the retiring legends, for better or for worse, but it tended to work out. And then my last school was Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, where I took over. I was only really the second director in the school. The director before me actually had passed away, and they did a year search.
Mm.
And then I took over there. And each one of those situations was just a little bit bigger and presented some additional opportunities. The programs that I was at, I did my best to build those up, and we did some great things. Lincoln played at Midwest. That was in 2005, the first band that I took to Midwest. Buchholz, we played at Midwest twice. In 2009 and 2014, and then my last year teaching, 2018, was when I took Stoneman Douglas to the Midwest Clinic. So I was very, very fortunate and blessed to be at the right places at the right time with really great people around me.
So what I'd love to hear is you have all this experience taking over for retiring legends, as you say. Any advice for people who are taking over in that position? What are some things like maybe that you should not do and things you
Oh
should do?
yeah. Well, it's funny because all of the things that I'm sharing with you, I share with my students at Vandercook, which is one of the reasons that I ended up there, and I'll talk about this later, I suspect. But the one piece of advice that I tell my students is don't change anything that you don't have to change when you walk into any situation, because there will be students and parents that maybe didn't like the previous director, students and parents that were sort of, lukewarm, and then students and parents that love the previous director. So you just want to, tread carefully and only change things that you absolutely have to change in year one, like if there's some, discipline issue or something like that that you need to address. Um, and then take 3 to 4 years to gradually change things to the way that you want to. And what I tell them is, even if you don't change a thing, it's going to be a shock to their system because you're a different person. Just by you being there, you're already changing the entire atmosphere and environment of the program. So that would be number one. And of course, I learned that kind of the hard way as I went along. And so, yeah.
That's great. I wish I'd heard that about 20 years ago.
Hmm.
That's awesome. Could have saved some pain. I remember
Yeah.
one thing in my school that I had to change. We have the tiered band room, right? Which I wish I
Hmm.
could get rid of, but that's what we have. So the
Hmm.
kids always had their stand up on their same tier, so their posture was always really bad.
Mm.
I was insisted that they put the stand in a certain way on a certain place on a certain tier, so they were able to sit up straight. And that was a something that silly was a battle at first, but then it's some funny. You make those changes, and then all of a sudden you turn around and all of a sudden you don't have to make them anymore because you made them last year or the year before. So, once you make those little changes, the ball does roll, and builds.
Right. Well, and that would be an example of a change that I would make because it's compromising how they play. It's
Yep.
compromising their posture. And so that's something that, okay, if we're going to play well, we have to be able to sit up.
You do a lot of honor bands. Obviously, you have a lot of experience. Looking at the
Hmm.
grade two, three, four level, a couple pieces that jump out to you that you think are really quality pieces people should do.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just did two honor bands over these last 2 weekends. And I always like to put in something lyrical to really work on, like I mentioned before, sonority, intonation, phrasing, shaping, musicality, and all that. And so, two pieces that I've been programming quite a bit lately are Julie Giroux's "Our Castaways," which has a really gut-wrenching story because it's basically dedicated to pets, to rescuing animals.
Hmm.
Um, in fact, we have a puppy dog. We drove 2 hours north to Milwaukee, and we saved a Shih Tzu, and he lives here with us. Another piece is that I actually premiered this with the Vandercook band. Alfred Watkins guest conducted it for me. It was Bridget's Cross by Gerard Hall, who is an up and coming composer, and that's a those are both pretty much grade threes, and it's just a beautiful piece. And Gerard says it's basically kind of a prayer of solace. So those two pieces generally pop up into my program, when I do these honor bands. And then there's an older piece that Brian Balmages wrote. Obviously, everybody knows Brian, but he wrote kind of a grade 4.5 called Flight of the Griffin and back in 2003. And it sort of has some dance-like features, 5/8, beautiful middle section. And so I use that. The kids enjoy doing that. Percussion, is busy. And then I also like to go back to the classics. And so I like to program Chant and Jubilo by
Hmm.
Francis Macbeth, which is also kind of a grade four. It's a good introduction to Macbeth's music. And so those are just a few pieces. I'll throw in a march in there. There's one that I do by Fillmore that's arranged by Robert Foster called North South College All Stars. It was written in 1953, and then Bob Foster arranged it in 2007. It works pretty well. And again, it's kind of like grade four, that sort of thing. But those are just a few pieces that I do in the grade three, four. Generally, I do the high school band, so I don't
Yep.
deal too much with the programming the grade one or two
Yeah,
pieces.
I love those suggestions. I'm going to check them out. I actually want to play for people Chant and Jubilo by Macbeth. Many people don't know Macbeth's music, especially the younger teachers. So we're going to
Yep.
pause here real quick. We're going to put on a recording for them of Chant and Jubilo. Midwest 2024, you did a presentation, the Kaminsky method, developing balanced blend and an accurate center of pitch in the wind band. Tell us a little bit about it. What are the key points of that if people were not able to be there?
Well, it's interesting because at the beginning you asked me about what I do in terms of going into band rooms, which is really my favorite thing to do. It's like if I had to do one thing, I love doing honor bands too, but I really like going into band rooms and affecting band programs and the directors and the students. Chris Sharp, actually, of Chris Sharp Music, is the one that encouraged me to do a presentation at Midwest. I mean, there's other folks that have too, but they said you really need to share this at Midwest, what you do. And I'm not the guy that loves to stand up in front of people and do a presentation on how to get your band to sound good. I like to just do it.
You and me both, yeah.
Yeah. So he said, well, I'll tell you what. He said, I'll submit the session proposal to the Midwest Clinic, and then if it gets accepted, would you do it? I'm like, sure. So he submitted it, and that's where the title came from. I didn't title it the Kaminsky method. It's like once he submitted it, and then he told me, oh, we got approved. I'm like, oh, and you called it the Kaminsky method? Oh, okay. That was based on like a show, I guess. But anyway. The other stipulation was that I have to have a demonstration ensemble if I'm going to do this session. So we did, and it was the Lockport Township High School Wind Symphony with Brian Covey, who's a phenomenal director. And in fact, when we moved to Illinois, we moved here to Lockport so that our younger son, who's now finishing his senior year at Michigan State University, so that he could be in that band. Yeah, I was looking for a band program that had a similar DNA to Stoneman Douglas, and Lockport Township was that program, and it was fantastic. So anyway, so what I talk about is that there are three elements of band sonority: breathing, tone, and intonation. So breathing, which is many times bypassed by ensemble directors, is just learning how to get enough air into your lungs to produce the most resonant tone. I always ask the question, what's the minimum capacity your lungs need to be filled up in order to produce a resonant tone? And the answer is 80%. Like you can look it up on Google. And most students don't live there, and there's no other class where they have to breathe like that, right? And so we do like a 2-count breath exercise. And then we talk about how to produce the best possible tone. We do a little note bending with the brass.
Can you
really trying to?
can you
Go ahead.
walk us through that? Like pretend like we're all in your session. Can we take a minute and do a breathing exercise that you would do with the band?
Sure. Yeah. So what I have everyone do is they put their right hand on their stomach over their abdominal area. And the reason we do that is because when we fill up these two balloons called the lungs, it pushes down an involuntary muscle called the diaphragm, and it causes the abdominal area to expand. And so right hand, to make sure that our right hand is moving forward when we inhale, and then we put our 4 fingers in the left hand together vertically and make an O shape around the big knuckle, and then we just inhale like that, and then blow on the palm of the hand for 12 counts. So we go in for 2 through the big knuckle, and then exhale onto the center of the palm of the hand for 12 counts to give us a focal point. And I also encourage expelling air for 2 counts before inhaling for 2. So basically it's exhale for 2, inhale for 2 through the big knuckle, and then exhale for 12 onto the hand. And so that's the breathing exercise. Now, I also use what I call breathing tubes, and then we also use balloons at the beginning of the school year. It's 1/2-inch PVC coupling that we put between our teeth to just really feel the sensation of getting the air down deep into the lungs. And then we use the balloons to inflate. It's sort of a visual monitor of the air as it's going in. You want the balloon to inflate evenly over the course of 12 counts. So that's in a nutshell, what we do as far as the breathing aspect.
Any other thoughts about, say there's a band director right now driving to school and they're like, say I'm thinking about the pyramid of sound, the sonority of my band, right? And it's like, okay, I know what the pyramid of sound is supposed to be instrumentation wise, but I don't have that and I can't fix that right now.
Right.
Obviously playing with good tone, it doesn't matter good tone has to come first. But
Right.
like, how can they help create this sonority when they don't have six tubas with seven euphoniums and all the
That's
things?
a great question. So I'm going to go back to Jack Crew. Um, when I taught at Lincoln High School in Tallahassee, and that was between 2000 and 2007. I'll tell you a quick story. They used to have morning pep rallies on Fridays of football games. 7 o'clock in the morning. I hated them. But when I first went there, the principal was actually, her name was Martha Bunch, and she was a trumpet player, was a music ed major at the University of Southern Mississippi, and then moved into administration. And so she wanted the band at everything. Um, and so she allowed him to be there my first semester. So we were both there. He was retiring in December, and he mentored me. And so I would follow him around. They'd do these morning pep rallies. And he was, he'd been teaching for over 40 years. And so there was a sign up sheet. And I would look at the sign up sheet like on Thursday, and I'd be like, Jack, it's like we have three flutes, a saxophone, no tubas, a trombone. Like this instrumentation is terrible. And he's like, don't worry about it. So then we'd go and they'd play, and it sounded like a band. Every time we had these pep rallies, it sounded like a band, regardless of the awful instrumentation. And I'm like, how am I seeing what I'm seeing, but actually hearing a band? And it goes back to what you just said. If every person in the ensemble is producing a characteristic resonant tone, the tones blend in such a way that, and then you balance it, they blend in such a way that it still sounds like an ensemble. And case in point, flex band music has really come on the scene, and I'm a big proponent of that because with flex band music, you have all parts covered, regardless of the instrumentation. And as long as you have the students listening down, right? I always say listen down to the lowest octave of the note you're playing. But if you're listening down and you're producing a resonant tone, the tones blend. It's just like a brass quintet, or a wooden quintet or a
Hmm.
flute trio, you know. So that's basically what, with the breathing and then produce the tone and you're in tune, you can get a sonority even with an odd instrumentation.
I mean, not that this is apples to oranges, but I remember hearing the Marine Band live in a gym in southern Maine. It was like the worst sounding gym I'd been to, but they sounded amazing on the Bach, Toccata, and Fugue because they were able to make that sonority.
Right. Well, you make that
Yeah.
sonority, and actually, you just reminded me of one other story. Again, a Jack Crew story. So we were at the University of Florida in Memorial Auditorium. The state assessment was taking place. I was sitting next to Bobby Adams, actually, and the bands were going on, and the comments that there's always a row of band directors that are like, it's the row that all sit together and listen to the bands, and they were saying, well, it doesn't sound like any band's going to sound good in here. Because it was very like kind of very echo-ish. Their acoustics weren't great, and so forth. Then Jack Crew's band went on stage, and after about 30 seconds, Bobby Adams leans over to me and he says, "It ain't the stage."
There goes that.
Because again, it's the sonority and knowing what to listen for. I tell my students at Vandercook, how do you adapt to a new space? You do by listening for the same things you do in our rehearsal. Like if you can't hear what you hear in our rehearsal space, then you're not going to hear it. The audience isn't going to hear it either. And so that's how you adapt, sonority and listening.
That's great. I try to do that with my students because my band room is one of those completely dead band rooms that like nothing rings ever. And
Right.
then the hall we play in is a great sounding hall, but without a lot of time to be in there, it's hard. You mentioned pitch bends. What's a pitch bend exercise that the average band director could do with their band?
So what I try to do when I teach, I really teach band like a private lesson. At some point in my career, and I mentioned this in my session at Midwest, I stopped teaching band and I started teaching the individual in
Mm.
band. And so it's more of a master class. And the things that I do for the brass, because I'm a clarinetist, but the things that I do for the brass are things that my professional brass players do themselves to become great players. And note bending is one of those things. And so I simply just take a concert F. Horns are on their G, so the embouchure setting is similar to that of the trumpet on their G. And then we'll just bend down a half step, and we hold for 12 counts. So we'll hold the concert F for 12 counts, and then we'll exhale for two, inhale for two, and then have them hold the same count structure, but a half step lower, bending the note down to force them to open up and be flexible. And then I have them come back up and I tell them, find the sweet spot, find the resonant point of your instrument. Because most brass players, when they start a little bit above center, above the
Hmm.
center of the pitch. And then you tune to that, and then you wonder why your band's out of tune. You have to find the sweet spot. What do you play, Kyle?
Trumpet.
Okay, well then you get it. And
Yeah.
my younger son, who's at Michigan State, also plays trumpet. And
I,
he marched Carolina Crown for 4 years. And
I
so
remember being in
a lot of that pedagogy, the goal is to try to provide that for your students in the band setting.
I remember being in college and Clay Jenkins, a famous LA trumpet player, was in there and he said, all the trumpet players play sharp. You always play sharp. And he said, I'll give you a hint. Play like 5 cents flat. He said the minute you actually play low, it's like swimming with the current rather than against it. And he's like, you won't get tired and you'll be more resonant. And that's exactly it. So the
Yeah, I
pitch
love
bending is
it.
great.
Yep,
Yep.
yep. So that's what we do. And my saxophone players at Vandercook asked, "Can we do that too?" Because several of them play in jazz band. And so I actually started getting my sax players because how many alto saxophones have you seen that like unfortunately play with like a clarinet embouchure?
Hmm.
I was one of those when I first started
Hmm.
playing sax as a young kid. And so it really helps them to make the embouchure more oval for the saxophone, just opens up the sound just like it does. So yeah, it's a great exercise. I start every rehearsal with that.
I love that. So people can, if they haven't already, like if they can find out the pitch of the mouthpiece of the woodwind instrument as well, you can work on first of all just matching the pitch, right? So what is it for clarinet? A B? Is it a B concert for
Well,
clarinet?
actually, if you take the mouthpiece barrel combination, it's an F sharp.
F sharp. Is that the way you'd suggest to do it with the barrel?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
and again, you get more resonance because you have that barrel on there.
Yeah.
And then I use the harmony director just to provide a pitch reference and just have them match that. I don't use tuners in rehearsal. The only tuners are their ears, and
Yep.
and the goal is to match.
And even just getting, I mean, if all of your woodwind players in a high school band or middle school band were able to match on their mouthpiece or mouthpiece and barrel, I mean, come
Oh,
on.
I mean, you're halfway there.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
And then I know a lot of woodwind teachers who will also then take it and practice bending down as well to center that pitch. So every instrument has a different one, doesn't it? Do you remember them off the top of your head? Alto sax, I think, is
A flat.
A
I'm
flat.
pretty sure. Yeah.
Okay.
If now you're testing my beginning band chops. All right. So yeah, A flat. A flute head joint, I think, is an A. Don't like
Yeah.
put this in stone. I'm sure it's easier to look up, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you got to get kids to like buy into working on that, but I've done that with young ages too, and my wife has too, and it works
Oh
really
yeah,
well.
and I there are a lot of great beginning band teachers that do that that could do it better than I do. So I mean, it's really, I think that the way to start on an instrument is on the mouthpiece and the head joint.
I think when we go around the country, let's talk about high school band for a second. The amount of high school bands that make concert band the core of what they do versus maybe, I know it's easy to have your marching band be the core because it's like the most visible, or having a lot of times people will like put all their eggs in the jazz band basket and all that. So I know you and I kind of agree on this. Concert band should be the core of a program. So I just would like to hear more of your thoughts as to why and maybe some ways to help make that happen.
Yeah, well, through the concert band is where you teach musicianship at the highest level. You should teach musicianship and fundamentals in every ensemble, whether it's jazz band, marching band, etc. But in the concert band arena with music literature as well, you're able to really maximize the teaching of musical concepts that then carry over into the other ensembles, including chamber ensembles, everything that they play. And I find it interesting that there are a lot of high school band directors that actually do a pretty good job teaching fundamentals in the marching arena, but then they don't carry that into the concert arena. And, like the breathing or long tones and some of these things. So and here's the deal. The stronger my concert bands were, the better my marching bands were.
100%.
And if you look at prolific band programs in the country, I mean, you look at Andy Seeley's Hebron band or Leif Cook at Dobbins Bennett. I mean, these bands have played at the Midwest Clinic. Their concert programs are Vandergrift, all of those. Look at the concert band and look how strong they are and what they're playing. You push your kids more in the concert arena, and then they're able to do incredible things on the field because of what the concert band is doing. And so that's where you really, I think, are able to teach those important musical concepts that really develop our students as musicians.
I also really love hearing about programs that try to do jazz band really well, but also try to do marching band really well, that they're able to kind of balance sort of those three big key areas. Now, within each one, obviously, you've got combos and more improvisation stuff. And over here, you've got winter guard, winter percussion, and things. But like the ability to try to keep things even or centered around the concert band, because it's so easy to go, we're going to do marching band only, or we're going to do jazz band only. Those programs that are able to sort of do as much as possible, I think serves their kids really well.
Well, and again, when the concert band setting is successful, it helps success in every other aspect of your program. And the other thing is, I'm not a jazzer because I'm a clarinetist, but I want my jazz bands to be the best they can possibly be because there are kids that will gravitate to jazz. There are kids that live for marching band. There are kids that live for what my bread and butter is for the wind ensemble, And so I think as music educators, we need to provide every possible avenue of music making and make them the best they can possibly be, regardless of whether it's my thing or not.
Speaking of clarinet, the more and more I teach jazz ensemble over the years, I find more and more great literature that uses the clarinet, whether it's something that's historical or a double within the woodwind section. I think if you have like a jazz band on an average school and you actually have a clarinet player who's really good, look for those pieces where you can actually utilize them on clarinet. It's such a great color, and a lot of people say clarinet like is not a jazz instrument, quote unquote. I know you get less opportunities, right? Because
How
like
about Benny Goodman?
right? I mean, yeah.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that because I even have thought about I've used French horn.
Hmm.
So my wife is a horn player. She doesn't play anymore, but she went to Berkeley, and she played jazz French horn when she was at Berkeley, and it was a thing, you know.
Mm.
And so, yeah, and in a lot of high school situations, you have you may have your top jazz band, but then you have your come one, come all jazz band, tuba, clarinet, flutes,
Hmm.
whatever. It's like let everybody be part of the party.
Well, and imagine this: say your trombone section's okay, but you have a great all-state French horn player. Like
Hmm.
you could have them play trombone, but you could
Hmm.
also give them a mellophone or have them play French horn and literally just write out all the parts.
Right.
I've done that before. Like the instrument almost doesn't matter, right?
Hmm.
The fact that if you can make the kids as successful as possible. Um,
Yep.
some thoughts on improving student leadership. I think this is something I'm continuously trying to improve in my program. I know a lot of directors are.
Yeah, this is another thing. I teach marching band methods here at Vandercook, and we talk about the importance of ownership in terms of the students and the having some sort of system in terms of student leadership. And of course, Dr. Tim is expert. In fact, I just saw him last night online. He's an expert in that. Scott Lang is another, and it's important. I think that in a nutshell, if there's anything that doesn't require a music education degree, let your students do it. You know,
Hmm.
and that would include they can run sectionals, they can pass off music, they can file music, they can set up, tear down, but allow them the opportunity to be part of the process so that they have more ownership, loading equipment, unloading equipment. So I always had some sort of student officer structure where we had like a band captain, the drum majors, and then you had section leaders and equipment managers or whatever you want to call them, lieutenants. We had mentors, that like we had somebody in charge of the mentor system where there was an upperclassman that mentored a younger, like a freshman coming into the trumpet section. And, so as much as you can get students to do, the program will be more theirs and ours as opposed to me telling them what to do.
Another side note on that I found really effective is also let them catch you doing the chairs like once a month or have them see you sweep the floor so that you give them the message that you're not above everything, but because I know sometimes if you don't do that, they could be like, oh, he's kind of too good and whatever. No, it's just I need time to do this.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because at Vandercook, we have a saying, all hands on deck all the time.
Hmm.
And so we all, including myself, we all, schlep stands, chairs. You see a piece of trash on the floor, you pick it up, throw it in the trash can. Because again, it shows them that this is our program. It's not you working for me or me working for you. It's we're doing this together. And ultimately, when you're on stage, for example, in a concert, you know, it's not you or them, it's us performing.
Hmm.
You're performing with these teenagers. And so it's a collective experience, a communal experience, I guess, if you will.
I do want to say in all my times going to Midwest, all the Vandercook students who are there volunteering have been amazing. They're always super polite and super helpful. So I wanted to pass that
Well,
on.
thanks. Well, and thank you. One of the reasons for that, in addition to the fact that we have great music education majors at Vandercook, is the fact that it's our culture at Vandercook.
Mhm.
That's what we teach these future band directors is how to work together and be willing to do the work.
So great. Last thing I wanted to ask you about a little bit is sort of a healthy role of competition within a band program. Like, where does it belong? How much stress should we put on it?
Sure. Well, I think you should try to beat everybody you compete against. No, I'm kidding. So it's just like anything else, a healthy balance. And so when I taught in Florida, we would do a few regional competitions. I wasn't the guy that was out every weekend with the marching band, but we do one and then a couple of weeks to kind of process the feedback from the judges and try to implement. And then the next one, we did like BOA, super regionals, things like that. And the goal is to compete against yourself. We always used to say, be better today than you were yesterday, you know. And we always tried to go to competitions where the competition was really good, so that our students could see excellence being displayed and demonstrated by their peers in other schools. And we developed some great relationships with some of those bands, especially like locally. For example, when I was at Stoneman Douglas, there was another school like 30 minutes north, Park Vista High School, that we sort of went back and forth winning the state marching band championship. And our kids respected each other, and we encouraged them, and they encouraged us. And of course, you want to win, but there's always a respect for others that are striving for excellence, and it always kept us on our toes, and we always appreciated what they did. I was great friends with their band director at the time, Aaron Snipes, who I'm actually going to fly down to Texas. He's at Braswell High School right now,
Hmm.
we've stayed in close contact, and he brings me down to work with his band and so forth. So I think just a healthy competition. I think no competition is probably not ideal either because it doesn't keep us on our toes. Just like when we're auditioning, like if I were to audition for a military band, there's going to be competition. I mean, competition sort of keeps us honest and keeps us on our toes. But it's not focusing on the other person. It's focusing on making yourself better. Even when our students audition for honor bands and all-state bands, the process of preparing the audition is as important as whether we get in or not. And that's really the bottom line is how is this helping us to be better?
I love that. I have one final question. You sort of have, so you mentioned Aaron and you mentioned Brian Covey earlier as well.
Mhm.
Is there a middle school or high school program and their director that you just have a lot of respect for that maybe people haven't heard about before, or is something you want to highlight about a program?
Robert Herrings. Robert Herrings. Uh, so we actually do a summer band director workshop that I started it last summer, and we do it again this summer. Shameless plug, July 11th through 14th this summer. Vandercook College of Music Band Director Summer Workshop. And what I've been trying to do is bring in somebody that's a pedagogue at the middle school level and a high school level. And Robert Herrings, probably a lot of folks on listening are aware of his Henry Middle School bands that were playing Lincolnshire Posey like a high school band. And so the question that we have is, okay, how did you do it? And again, it's incredible fundamental teaching. And so that would be one that pops into my head immediately. Um, and he's going to be our guest, at the band director workshop. And the other is going to be Scott Rush.
Mm.
He's going to go through his Habit series, and really, I tell Scott that it's more than his method books. It's a pedagogical approach to teaching that's very similar to what I did when I was a high school band director, and what he did when he was at Wando. But that would be the first one that pops into my mind. And any of those Texas middle school bands, you notice, like, I think at the Midwest Clinic, rarely do you see, I hate to say this, but rarely do you see a band that's a middle school band that's not from Texas on those stages, because they just teach fundamentally so well at such a high level, and then the product speaks for itself. But that would be the first one that would pop into my head.
Beautiful. Alex, thanks so much for spending the time. Appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.